The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to Training Camp Confidential, Training Camp with the Washington Commanders, day number 13 of training camp. All about the big news of the day. Washington Commanders signed wide receiver Martavius Bryant in a move that was in conjunction with that signing. They released place kicker Ramiz Ahmed. Probably not the one that you expected them to release. I've got thoughts on both of those things taking place, as well as practice today. Give you some cliff notes from practice. Dan Quinn had his press conference today. Number of things were gleaned from that. I told you he's been really good with these press conferences every day and really giving us some good things to converse about. We also heard from various players in, media scrum sessions after practice. Terry McLaurin, Martavius Bryant himself, Nick Allegretti, who continues to just be a great interview. Like I said, I think that guy is going to be my new Wes Schweitzer. I've already really started to take a strong liking to Nick Allegretti. If his play matches the way that he speaks, he's going to be one of my favorites very quickly. So we'll get to all of that and then some today. Let's start off by quickly talking about practice. Then we're going to talk about the news of the day. Then we're going to get to Dan Quinn. And then we're going to get to your comments and get out of here. So this was a fully padded practice. And I actually liked the tenor of today's practice. Remember, it felt like last week we kind of limped into that Jets joint practice last Thursday. Kind of felt like we were all discombobulated. The practice that we had in Ashburn prior to heading to New Jersey was very uneven. The offense had its worst day of training camp. There were injuries galore. We weren't healthy up front. It was a mess, and I felt like it kind of bled in to the joint practice up in New Jersey against the Jets. So this one, bit different of feeling coming out of this practice as we head to Miami. Fully padded practice. You get two offensive linemen back in the fold. At the tackle positions, Cornelius Lucas was back at left tackle. Andrew Wiley was back Cornelius Lucas was back at left tackle, and Andrew Wiley was back at right tackle. So you're getting some semblance of continuity up front. Still no Brandon Coleman. And I've already said that I don't anticipate him practicing at all this week, nor playing in the preseason game. Dan Quinn already said if he doesn't practice, he will not play. He has not practiced Monday nor Tuesday. I don't anticipate him practicing in the joint practice versus the Dolphins, and hence he will not play on Saturday. I think the earliest Brandon Coleman can be back on the field is next week when they prepare for the New England Patriots in their final preseason game of the summer. And Dan Quinn had something to say about that third preseason game against the Patriots, and we'll talk about that when we get to his press conference. So strong day by the offense. Jaden Daniels only had one incompletion on the day, and that was almost caught by Terry in the back of the end zone. So the one pass that hit the ground from Jaden Daniels today was almost a completion. He connected with multiple receivers throughout the day, including a couple of times to Olamide Zaccheaus during a 2-minute period. Then he also hit Terry in the end zone for a touchdown in a contested catch situation against Noah Igbenogany. So Jaden looked really strong today, continuing to stack good days on top of each other. I think that momentum that he got from the Jets preseason game spilled over into the week, and he's playing with a ton of confidence right now. And the players around him sense it. They talked to Terry, they talked to Nick Allegretti after practice, and they both said that this guy is just bubbling with confidence, and not in a negative way, right? This is a guy that is just supremely confident, and it shows, and he exudes that confidence onto his teammates, not in a cocky way. He's having fun out there on the football field, and that's infectious as well. Martavius Bryant was out at practice today. Obviously, he was signed earlier in the day, and he jumped right onto the practice field, and he got first-team reps. Hey, how about that? I've got something to say about that. And he had a nice block that sprung JC Ice on a play for a nice gain. And then Bryson Tremaine had another catch that turned heads today in practice. So he continues to, again, stay in the fight. I still don't think he's going to make this roster when it's all said and done, but you have to continue to stay in the fight. And I think if nothing else, Bryson Tremaine remains resilient, continues to make plays, continues to give the coaches something to think about, and keeps his name relevant. That's the thing you want to do when you're fighting for a roster spot, is remain relevant. You don't want to go quiet. You don't want to go dormant. You don't want them to forget about you. You need to continue to stay and remain relevant. And Bryson Tremaine continues to do exactly that. So let's talk about Martavius Bryant getting first-team reps. So I thought about this last night. We talked about Bryant a little bit last night because I had brought up the fact that he was going to meet with the team again. And that felt sort of, it felt like it was leading towards what ultimately happened today, which is he signed, right? Because they had brought him in the spring and didn't sign him. So if you're bringing him back now in the summertime, it almost felt like a formality. It felt like, you know, this wasn't about, hey, this was, are you still in shape? Good. You're in great shape. All right, let's sign you up. Right. That's what it felt like. So I started to think about, because we talked about last night, Martavius Bryant, you know, would I do it? You guys said you wouldn't do it. And then we started talking about T. Higgins, you know, similar size receiver that might be available next year. Will be available in free agency next season, barring the Bengals trading him during, you know, the season before the trade deadline, which I don't see happening unless they're out of it. So he'll be a free agent next year, and he's a guy that I would love to sign as a free agent because of the same reasons Dan Quinn brought up about Martavius Bryant, you know, size, speed, catch radius, things of that nature. So I started thinking about why Martavius Bryant, right? Why would you go out and sign a guy like this? And I go back to the wide receiver screen that was thrown to Terry on the first possession of the preseason game versus the Jets. And I talked about Jahan Dotson being out there and not being able to make that block effectively. And one of the things John Keim has talked about, he talked about it on this program. He's talked about it on his podcast numerous times. And he continues to bring up the physicality in the run game, or as a blocker in general for the receivers, is important, which is why he felt like before Diami started making plays as a receiver, catching the football, he kept talking about Diami's ability to block and how he felt like that was the reason Diami was getting first-team reps in the spring. That is bled over into the summer, and Diami's making the most of those opportunities now as a pass catcher. Jahan got an opportunity in the game to showcase some physicality, something that he does not excel at, and he failed miserably. My response to that was, don't put him in situations where he has to be the lead blocker on a play such as a screen. It's not going to work out well. We've seen that over the first 2 seasons of his career, that he's not good in those situations. You cannot ask Jahan Dotson to be the lead blocker. And we had numbers in that situation. I've already said that had Jahan executed that block, there's a chance that Terry scores on that play. Okay, we had numbers on that side of the field. We had 2-on-1 numbers. The safety was over Terry, but he was off by like 7 to 10 yards. And then the corner was pressed up on Jahan, and Jahan was able to block him, but he didn't execute the block well. And the guy that Jahan was blocking made the tackle. That shouldn't have happened, right? I think that pissed them off, to be honest with you. And my response was, hey, just don't put Jahan in those situations. Their response was, how about we just not put Jahan in those situations, period? How about we find a bigger, more physical receiver? Because what we don't want to do is give the tell to the opposition that hey, we're throwing a wide receiver screen here because Jahan Dotson's not over there. He normally would be. They put a different guy there, so they're probably trying to throw a screen, and they don't want Jahan Dotson anywhere near that. You want to get away from that, right? You don't want teams to be able to know, hey, this is what you're thinking about doing based off of personnel and how you're aligned, right? So you would like Jahan to do his job so that there's no tell and anything could happen, but Jahan's just not good in those situations. They bring in a bigger, more physical receiver that can block. And the reason that Diami wasn't in that particular situation, I think Diami would have been in there, is because on that deep ball, I don't know if you saw after the game, he had an interview. And I remember as soon as he caught that deep ball, I was worried that he had hurt himself. He asked to come out of the game. He ran, he did this, right? Which is a universal sign. That and this is a universal. This is usually I'm tired. He just was like, yo, come get me, right? So I thought maybe he fell on his shoulder or something like that because he really didn't celebrate. He immediately got up and told him, hey, come get me. But we later saw that he had a patch on his nose. When he went down, the helmet slammed against the turf, and the bridge of his nose got hit by his helmet, and it caused an abrasion there, maybe even a little cut. So that's why he came out of the game. I think he would have been in that situation, and Jahan would not have been exposed in the way that he was. But because Diami was not available at the time, he was receiving treatment, they had to put somebody else in, and they put Jahan in, and he got wrecked. And so in their mind's eye, let's just bring another guy in here who can offer us a little something. And Dan Quinn specifically talked about the red zone and things of that nature. And so I just got to thinking about that too. And they've preached physicality at every level, at every position, and they have not discriminated whatsoever when it comes to physicality. They expect physicality from every single player on the team, and that includes Tressway, which is why they were so pumped that he made a tackle on special teams. They don't give a shit who you are. They expect a level of physicality. That is their standard, and I don't think Jahan Dotson is meeting that standard right now. Again, I don't think this is going to alter how they utilize him. I don't think he's going to get less snaps. I don't think he's not going to make this team or anything crazy that I've seen people throwing about over the last 42 or 48 hours since, the preseason game and the conversation surrounding Martavius Bryant. But I do think they're a little disappointed in the lack of physicality. But if they had been watching, then they wouldn't have been disappointed because they would have known what they were walking into with Jahan. I've said this since he was at Penn State. This is who he's been. This is what he was in college. This was the big knock on him coming out, and you have to adjust accordingly, which is why I talk about motions and, stacks and bunches to get him free releases. So anyway, let's get to a few of these quick little, scrums from these players that were after practice. Terry was asked about Martavius Bryant, and Terry talked about, knowing him, from his collegiate days, but not really watching him in the NFL as a Steeler, but just knowing that this guy is big, fast, and, can go up and get the football in contested catch situations. He's got a unique skill set. It's one that we currently don't have unless you count Bryson Tremaine. So I think, Terry looked at it and said, hey, we understand that it's about competition and this guy can come in and help. And he's just another guy you throw into the mix with a unique skill set that can come in and help this team. And we're all about it, essentially, is what Terry said. Then he talked about Diami and the catch he made versus the Jets in the game, and from the Diami perspective and from the Jaden Daniels perspective. And he said that from Diami's perspective, he's so proud of Diami and the progress that's being made. He says one thing he can honestly say is that Diami has taken well to coaching. Terry said, I've given him pointers, and Coach Ingram has given him things to work on, and he's worked on those things and been intentional about working on those things this offseason. He said, Terry said in particular, I've been working with him on getting off the football, releases. He's like, if you do your work early, it'll give you a chance to make a play late. And He said Diami has been very intentional in working on that, and you can see it. He's getting off the line of scrimmage, and that's helping him make plays down the field. And he said that in the case of Jaden, he loves the maturation process from Jaden and how he continues to grow every day. And he's like, Jaden's confidence is allowing us to be confident as players that if we go out and we do the things that we need to do, he's going to get it to us. And he's like, the level of accuracy that we're seeing from him, the ball placement, he's like, the touch. If we need a 2-ball, and he said a 2-ball is when you got to put it with less air and more zip, right? He's like, he throws the 2-ball when it's supposed to be thrown. He's like, he puts air on the deep ball, gives us a chance to run under it. And as receivers, it's our job to toe that red line. You guys know about the imaginary red line. They actually have a real red line in practice, but that's that line. It's imaginary on an actual field that you try to toe as a receiver to give your quarterback space towards the outside, over towards the sideline to throw the football over your outside shoulder when you're running a deep ball route up the field. So he's like, if we do what we're supposed to do, you got confidence as a receiver that Jaden Daniels is going to put the ball where it needs to be and give you a chance to make a play. So, Terry talked about that. Nick Allegretti spoke. He talked about the continuity up front. And he said, look, rarely do you start the season with 5 guys up front and finish with the same 5 guys. That's true, right? So he's like, you got to have the ability to adjust and adapt on the fly. He's like, I've played already in this small amount of time in camp. I've already worked next to 3 or 4 different guys. In the game, I worked, next to a different guy that I hadn't been working next to, right? And Trenton Scott, even though he did get some reps in practice next to Trenton Scott, but not very many. And so he's like, I've worked at multiple positions already this year. And so I've already been preconditioned over the life of my career, because remember, this was a guy that wasn't a starter that had to play all 3 interior spots to make it in this league. So he's like, look, I've been there, done that. I've played center this training camp. I played guard this training camp. So you got to be ready for anything, because injuries happen in this league. And generally, you're not going to finish the season with the 5 guys that you start. So he said, while he's a veteran, he's able to step back in. He did it today. We don't worry about him. He said, I am concerned about Brandon Coleman, though. Being a rookie, these are invaluable reps. Clearly, he's not taking them right now, but he said he's a smart kid. I love what I've seen from him in the meetings. He asks great questions. He's definitely dialed in to these walkthroughs and taking a bunch of mental reps. But at the end of the day, got to be out there, which is what Dan Quinn said yesterday. You can take as many mental reps as you want. You can be as studious of a student in the classroom as you want. You can take excellent notes, but there's an application that has to take place on the field. And if you're not healthy, you can't do that. And so he's missing invaluable snaps. It almost makes me feel like I don't know if he can be ready to start the season. He was on track to do that. And as he misses these last 2 weeks, him missing these joint practices were massive. These were invaluable reps that he was going to get over these, last week and now this upcoming weekend. He's just, I don't know if he can overcome it in order to start early. I think as they get him back up to speed, get him comfortable, I can see him starting week 2 or 3, but I don't know if he'll be ready to start week 1 versus Tampa. We'll see. The beauty is, if he's ready to come back week 3 versus the Patriots, gets reps in that game, they still have a whole nother week between, before the game week to get him up to speed, to get him practicing. It just sucks because you're not going up against another team, right? But anyway, I digress. And then Martavius Bryant spoke to the media today, and he just was humbled for the opportunity. He said, look, I never quit on myself, but I'd be lying to you if I said it wasn't tough. You just don't know if you're going to get this opportunity. And so you got to stay ready. He said, I am in much better shape this year than I was last year, because up until last year, he hadn't gotten an opportunity and had been out of the league for quite some time. And so he said, I was 230 last year when Dallas gave me the call. And I spent 8 games in, their system last year, never got the call up to the active roster. But he said, I'm 200 and I think he said he's 212 or either 212 or 205, one or the other. So he's in tremendous shape. And he said, he's going to do whatever he can and try to help this team. This is the first time he's been in a training camp in 6 years, right? It's been 6 or 7 years. I don't even know if he was in a training camp with the Raiders that year. He might have just signed on later on that year, but I don't think he's been in a training camp since his days in Pittsburgh, maybe. But whatever the case may be, you're either talking 6 or 7 years that it's been since he's been in a training camp. So he's like, I don't take any of this for granted. I'm so blessed to have this opportunity, and I'm going to try to make the most of it, right? The man's 32 years old. He hasn't played football in the NFL, actual snaps in an actual game since 2018 was the last time he played in an actual NFL game. So, yeah, it's a really interesting signing. He's not insured of a roster spot. Given the receiver position and the state of the position, I don't rule anything out. I've already told you it's not a great group of receivers. After the first 5 guys, anything's possible, right? So I'm not shocked that they brought in more competition. I am, however, shocked that they cut Ramiz Ahmed, but not because of who he is. I've always said I thought they wanted a veteran kicker, which is why they signed Brandon McManus. I told you that I didn't think they would sign. I would sign, Mevis, but he's a rookie. I don't think they want a rookie kicker. They want someone with experience. I've been talking about that, which is why when I did my 53-man roster, I gave the nod to Riley Patterson because he has NFL kicking experience, and they value that. They don't want a guy that hasn't done it at this level before, and they don't want to be the team that gives that guy experience, right? I told you it's a real, catch-22. It's hard because you juxtapose, wanting a guy that can do it, but not wanting to give him the experience to prove that he can do it. They want a proven commodity, and if he doesn't get it done, he being Riley Patterson, they're going to go in a different direction. But Ramiz Ahmed got cut. I told you his kicks didn't excite me, right? I don't think he has a big leg. That's a problem in today's NFL. There once upon a time you could have a kicker like Sean Sweezum who couldn't make a kick over 50 yards to save his life. But anything below 50, it was money, right? I watched him kick for the Steelers for years, and at Heinz Field with that crosswind, if you didn't have a strong leg, the wind was going to gobble your shit up. And I watched him kick there for years, and they wouldn't even dare trot him out there for anything over 48 or 49 yards, right? But anything under 49, Sean Sweezum would go out there and bang that bad boy through the uprights. It's a different day now in the NFL. Kickers are kicking from 55 and 56 yards routinely. You have to have a kicker that has the ability to kick a 54-yard field goal. No one wants to punt from the opposing team's 37, and no one wants to always constantly have to go for it on 4th and 7 from the other team's 37-yard line. That's a field goal attempt in today's NFL. And if you don't have a kicker who can provide you with enough confidence to send him out there to kick it from 54 or 55, that's a problem. And I didn't see Ramiz Ahmed, and I told you guys as much. I don't think his leg is big. Every single one of those kicks, and Dan Quinn talked about this the very first week of training camp. He said, and they asked him, what are you looking for in a kicker? And he said, I'm looking for consistency. I'm looking for ball speed. I'm looking for the height of the kick. I'm looking for consistency with all of those things, whether it's a 35-yard kick, a 45-yard kick, or a 55-yard kick. I'm looking for the same explosion, foot to ball and ball exploding off your foot and caroming up in the air with speed, end over end, right? And I'm telling you, he's kicking knuckleballs. They're barely making it to the middle of the net. We're talking 37 yards. We're talking 33 yards. They didn't look like sure makes. They felt like, man, I hope I don't miss. And they wanted someone with experience. So they cut him. And Quinn said in the press conference, he wanted to give Riley Patterson the entire week to kick in practice the joint practice as well, and then the game, and see what he does. This is his opportunity to seize this moment and this kicking job. He goes out, has a tremendous week, kicks well, makes all of his kicks in the game, and I really hope there's a 52 or 54-yard attempt opportunity, because they're going to try him out there for it, and it's going to probably more likely than not be really good conditions in Miami on Saturday night, and I want to see him get that opportunity, and I want to see what he does with it. If he misses one kick, I don't give a shit where it's from. 54, 44, 34, 33 as an extra point. If he misses a single kick, I want his ass out of here. I'm not playing with Riley Patterson's ass. Because at this point, you missed from 37 or 39, wherever the damn kick was last week. I'm not playing with your ass. You got a very short leash, my friend. They cut a kicker to give you all of the reps so you didn't even have to worry about competition. And they've been preaching competition, competition, competition. And they literally went against the grain and did the thing that they've preached all offseason, all camp. They did the opposite of the thing that they've talked about. They cut the guy that was going to provide you with pressure to force you to have to make kicks and to clear the path for you so you don't have to look over your shoulder. What did Ramiz do today? What is Ramiz doing? Did he make all of his kicks? You don't got to worry about none of that shit. They took the competition element away and said, go win the job. And if you can't do it, you got to carry your ass. So, it'll be interesting to see if he takes full advantage of this opportunity or not. I think he will. I think he'll make his kicks this week. He'll bounce back, and he'll end up being the kicker on his team, unfortunately, because I don't trust him. You already know how I feel about Riley Patterson. I don't trust him. But let's see what happens. Let's get to Dan Quinn's press conference. DQ spoke prior to practice today. Started off the press conference by talking about some of the things they did in practice yesterday, and then talked about some of the things that they were going to see in practice today. He started off, too, by talking about the Miami game upcoming this week. He said, quote, and this is a direct quote from Dan Quinn, on the Miami game this Saturday, we won't game plan, but we will allow the rules and the game to dictate how we play. Less scheme, more on evaluation, closed quote. So, again, I think this goes for both the joint practice and the game itself. You can kind of construct the joint practice. You can, set up the situation, 2-minute, 4-minute, 3rd and 7, 1st and 10, your own 27-yard line with 3 minutes to go and 1 timeout, right? And you need a touchdown, down 4, right? You can set the scene in the joint practices. Not so much in the game. You kind of let the game and the way it flows dictate how you respond and the things that you do. But similar to last week, it's not about scheme. So, again, I think you're going to see a guy like Emmanuel Forbes probably struggle. He talked about Forbes particularly in this press conference. We'll get to that a little bit later on. He said, less scheme. So I'm big on scheme with a guy like Forbes, because I think it's going to be the rush up front, coupled with how they play on the back end, that's going to allow him to use his superpowers, right? Versus, running man-to-man coverage with the guy 15, 20, 30, 40 yards down the field. That is not Emmanuel Forbes' superpower. And so I think he's going to struggle yet again against those. Now, I will say this. He'll struggle in practice, the joint practice. If Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, all those guys are out there, he'll struggle. In the game, the Dolphins don't have dynamic backup receivers. Like the guys I watched play against the Atlanta Falcons last week, trash. So if those guys are out there, I like to think that Forbes will be able to stay in their hip pocket. But, we'll see, because Brown Lee got him. But Brown Lee is not trash. And he's talented, he's big, he's fast. I didn't see one of those guys out there for Miami this past week. So we'll see, right? But again, less scheme means, just line up and play ball. And that's not going to favor Emmanuel Forbes. And then more on evaluation, he said he sat down with Adam Peters. They looked at the tape from the Jets game, and that's kind of what they're going to do with this Dolphins game. Is they're going to put guys in positions and just turn them loose and say, "Let's see what you got," right? And they're going to evaluate them accordingly. And some guys are going to flourish in that situation. Other guys, not so much. He talked about Tyler Ott, the long snapper we signed from Seattle. And he said, it's kind of it's funny that he used the exact word that I was saying when the question was asked of him about Tyler Ott. I said, well, it's a thankless position. And he literally said, well, it's a thankless position because really we don't want to hear shit from the long snapper. It's a good day at the office if the long snapper is invisible. Last year, we talked way too damn much about the long snapper, and that is a problem. Okay, if we're having full-fledged conversations, if we're dedicating 5 to 10 minutes about the long snapper, if people are super chatting about the long snapper, we got issues. Big problems. More likely than not. So Ott's been nice and quiet. We haven't heard from Tyler Ott. We haven't seen Tyler Ott do anything that would, force us to mention his name. That's the way, I like it, that's the way, I like it. Progression for Jaden this week going into the Dolphins game. So he said it's going to be a lot similar to what we saw last week from a work load perspective. They want to see him continue to do the things that he did last week. Now do it at a higher level. They're going to put a little bit more on his plate. I would anticipate that we'll see a little bit more from Jaden. If they have the offensive, if Andrew Wiley and Cornelius Lucas are out there on Saturday, I'd imagine that it won't just be screens being called. They'll actually let him drop back, throw a slant, actually let him drop back, throw it to somebody 7 yards down the field on a called play instead of a bunch of screens being called so that they don't put him at risk. So I do think there's going to be a little bit of an uptick this week in terms of what they'll ask Jaden. Remember, it's a process. They've told us this as much, and they're going to continue to move to the next stage of the process. And I think the next stage is, hey, let's put a little bit more on his plate, see how he handles it. Now, again, a lot of that is going to be predetermined by, hey, who's out in front of him? Because what they're not going to do is put him at risk if they don't have an offensive line that they feel confident in front of him. He talked about the kicker position still being an open competition. So it was funny at this point of the press conference, the media got wind of the fact that the team had signed Martavius Bryant and cut Ramiz Ahmed because Dan Quinn didn't mention it at the top of his press conference. He kept that to himself. And he was like, if they don't find out about it, I ain't going to say shit. And then I don't have to talk to him until tomorrow. So then I don't have to talk about it until tomorrow. And guess what? There's no practice tomorrow, so I won't be asked about it on Wednesday. Then they won't see me again on until Thursday with the joint practice. And then by that point, yeah, they'll ask me, but they'll be more concerned about the joint practice. So he was like, look, if they don't ask, I ain't gonna say shit. But the media members are checking their phones and shit. And oh, wait a minute, what is this? Commanders signed Martavius Bryant, cut Ramiz Ahmed. So clearly he got asked about it. And he started by talking about the kicker competition. He said, I want to start with Mees. He said, this was less about Mees and us, more about us wanting to give Riley Patterson an opportunity. Again, they wanted a veteran. That's all that says, right? Ramiz didn't miss any kicks in the preseason game. They had the same field goal percentage through the 5 practices together, 19 of 25, okay? Ramiz had the leg up if we were being technical in the competition, but it wasn't pretty from Ramiz. And Riley Patterson has NFL experience, and that's ultimately what won out. Now it's Riley Patterson's job to lose. So he's like, it's still an open competition at kicker, which tells me I wouldn't be shocked if somebody that they were interested in with NFL experience gets cut. I wouldn't be shocked if they kick the tires on another kicker and brought another guy, especially if Riley Patterson doesn't fare well this week. They're going to bring a guy in. If he kicks well this week, I don't know if they bring in anybody else. I think they might just, kind of concede the job to Riley and move forward. But if he doesn't kick well this week, oh, bet your ass they're going to bring somebody else in. So the fact that he said it's still an open kicking competition, yet there's only one kicker here, leads me to believe that he's leaving the door open in the event that Riley struggles this week. I don't think this is, hey, we still going to sign somebody else and make this a competition, even if Riley kicks it well. I think he just left the doors open saying, hey, it's still a competition. And that's a message to Riley, like, you don't get the shit done this week, we're going to bring somebody else in here. So he talked about Martavius Bryant, obviously, and he said adding another receiver with size and length was big for them. And it made me think, well, don't you already have a guy here in Bryson Tremaine that offers you a lot of those things? But clearly they don't love Bryson Tremaine, and they're not confident in Bryson Tremaine's ability to make plays and to be physical in the run game and things of that nature. And so, they asked him, why Martavius Bryant? He talked about size and speed and catch radius and all that stuff. And DQ went into specifics. He said, look, man, I was with this kid all last year, or, the better part of the latter half of the season, because he was there for the final 8 games of the Cowboys season last year. And he said, I got to see this kid every day in practice. He was on the scout team. And he was like, this dude was usually like the star receiver. If another team, like for instance, if we're playing the Eagles, he was A.J. Brown in practice. And he would kick our ass. And so, I thought this kid was ready and could help last year, but they never gave him the opportunity. So I always, kept that in the back of my mind, that this kid's talented, he's big, he's physical, and he's dying for an opportunity. And if the opportunity ever presented itself here, I always said to myself, he'd be a guy that I would be willing to give an opportunity to, because I think he's ready to seize that opportunity. And so here it is. They get to camp. They're not overwhelmed by the receiver position. So keep this in mind. Everything Dan Quinn just said is telling you, which is what we talked about last night. And I told you it was Tell the Truth Monday. And I said, I'm telling you, they don't love the receiver position. Okay, they're not overly impressed with the receiver position, because if they were, they wouldn't be making this move, because they had all offseason to sign Martavius Bryant, right? If DQ loved him so much and wanted to give him such an opportunity, he would have signed him the first time they brought him in here. And he could have not been in great shape then. I might have said to themselves, oh, he ain't serious. I don't know what the situation was, but if they truly believed in the kid, the way DQ is describing to us, they could have signed him when he came in here in May, when they had him for a workout and they didn't sign him, right? He could have been here for OTAs and minis and been here at the start of camp and been more immersed in the offense than showing up 3 weeks into camp and having to play catch up. So essentially what I'm telling you is they brought him in here because they're not blown away by the receiver position. And they shouldn't be. We already said that this position wasn't going to be great this year. And I look, there were other receivers that I thought were available when we took Luke McCaffrey. And this is not to shit on Luke McCaffrey, because I think he can be a good receiver for us. But there were other guys available. And, I don't know if anybody else was going to take Brandon Coleman, and they felt like they needed to get a tackle. And look, they weren't going to take the guys, the particular guy that I wanted, they weren't going to take him because he had character concerns, and they just weren't going to do that. Their first draft was full of guys that were team captains and guys with, squeaky clean pass and guys that were leaders and guys that fit that commander tag. And you really want your first draft to set the tone. They weren't going to draft the guy that I wanted them to draft at the receiver position. But I'm telling you, he would have helped. Okay. I'm just telling you, if there's 2 positions I know and I can scout very well, I can't tell you about all the other ones. It's hard. It's hit or miss. I can tell you about edge rushers and I can tell you about receivers. Okay. I rarely miss on those 2 positions. I know what the hell I'm talking about at those 2 positions. Everywhere else, it's a crapshoot because they're being coached. This is the technique that they're being coached. Is that with receivers and edge rushers, what you see is what you get. And if you have a certain type, then you know what you're looking for. And if a guy fits, you can say he's going to translate well to the NFL. And I don't think they love what they have at receiver. And now they're looking at the situation and they're saying, if we want to give Jaden the best opportunity to succeed, we got to put more around him. There's not much you can do at this point of the season, right? Your roster is pretty much what your roster is. Give or take one or two guys that you may sign from other teams' rosters once final cuts are made. Your roster is what it is at this point. You're not going to be able to make those changes until next offseason. So the best they could come up with was Martavius Bryant. He talked about his size and his catch radius, and they feel like he can be a real threat and asset in the red zone with his size, right? Then DQ was asked, is there a plan for the third preseason game for Jaden Daniels? And to which DQ responded, yeah, there is. We already know what it's going to look like for him in the third preseason game. And he also said that, you know, he didn't divulge that information though, right? But he also said that they're going to treat that last week of the preseason because there's no joint practices. It'll be the first time that they've got a preseason game at home this preseason. So he said they're going to treat that third preseason like a normal game week. So he said they're going to go through it, you know, where Monday you show up, you watch film, you weight lift, you do those things. Tuesday is normally an off day for the players. And then Wednesday, you know, and Tuesday, if you need treatment and all that stuff, you come in, obviously. But Wednesday, you come in, and that's the start of the work week. That's when they implement the game plan for the week. Everybody gets the script and what it's going to look like, and you that's your first real day of practice for the week. That's the install day. And then, you know, Thursday, obviously, you continue to work on certain things, and they're going to have like a red zone day and things of that nature. And then Friday, it's more of a glorified walkthrough day. You know, just kind of getting you ready for the game on Sunday. And then usually Saturday is a day of travel or more meetings, things of that nature to get you ready for the game if you don't have to travel, if you're at home. And then you play the game on Sunday. So they're going to go through that kind of process next week, Patriots week. That leads me to believe that there's a chance Jaden plays in that game. I still think that they're not going to risk it in that third preseason game, and you won't see any of the starters. But I wouldn't be shocked to see Jaden get out there for a possession or two. You know, they asked, does this week affect next week? And DQ said no. So in my mind, if the answer is no to that question, then if he plays, let's say he plays a quarter or a half in this Dolphins game, he's not playing in next week's game. Okay. He's not playing in that. If he plays one or two possessions in this game, that would lead me to believe that he probably would play next week against the Patriots. But again, it's hard to say. It's hard to say how they're going to attack because it is a different situation and you are dealing with a rookie quarterback, and there is a process that they already have in place for Jaden. So, you know, we will see how that goes. Then I thought this was a great question asked by Sam Fortier. He said, are there certain position battles or groups that you're interested in seeing in Miami? And this is a direct quote from Dan Quinn. Quote, yes, quite a few, I'd say. At corner, at defensive end, and a lot of spots on teams, closed quote. So clearly, they have not made up their minds at the cornerback position. I actually think that the five guys are pretty much solidified at corner. Noah Igbenogany is going to round out that group of five. Again, assuming that they're keeping five corners. You know the names. You know the guys at this point. Michael Davis, Benjamin St-Juste, Emmanuel Forbes, Mike Sainristil, and Noah Igbenogany are the five corners that I think are going to make this team. But they're not conceding anything, and they shouldn't. And he brought up, you know, Chig yesterday in the press conference talking about special teams and things of that nature. But I just don't see any of those guys, you know, being able to contribute because the five corners that you keep, they got to be ready at all times to contribute on defense. I don't think Chig or any of those other corners are ready to contribute defensively. It was painful when injuries would occur at corner and we would have to put in Christian Holmes. That shit was painful to watch. You know, having to put Tariq Castro-Fields in a real NFL game, that's not safe for your health, okay? So I just don't see them being comfortable enough to keep a guy on the roster that can't help at a position like corner, because unlike another position, say defensive end, where your fourth or fifth defensive end, say you keep 4 defensive ends. KJ Henry doesn't have to see the field at all in a defensive capacity, because you can play around with the defensive tackles. You can put 3 of them on the field at once. You can play around with the 3 guys you have in front of him at defensive end. You're only playing 2 at a time, and sometimes only 1 at a time. So you could scheme your way around having to put KJ Henry in the game if you don't feel comfortable with him being out there. But with the cornerbacks, all it takes is one guy to go down, and your 5th corner is in the game, more likely than not. So, defensive end, I told you. What did I tell y'all yesterday? Tell the Truth Monday, right? I said, we got depth issues at defensive end. Nobody stood out in the game. Not a single defense. I didn't walk away from that game saying, well, damn, you know who looked good at defensive end? Nobody. After the starters, obviously. After Dorrance and Cleveland. No, KJ had 1 play on a read option keep by the quarterback, and he made a good play to stay at home. That's cool. But anybody could do that, right? I didn't see 1 dude beat somebody, get to the quarterback. Jamin almost got to the quarterback. As a matter of fact, now that I'm thinking, did we have 1 sack in the game? 1. Did we sack anybody? I talked about yesterday, if ball is life, we dead. We dead. Did we get a sack, though? Like, these defensive ends, man, we talked about it in the offseason. When they signed Cleveland Farrell, I was like, if this is the best we're going to do, Cleveland Farrell and Dorrance Armstrong, and I actually like Dorrance Armstrong, but if this is the best we're going to do, we better do some shit in the draft. And the only thing we did in the draft was Javonte John Baptiste in the 7th round. Yeah, it's going to be a long season at defensive end. If Fowler don't step up, stay healthy. If Dorrance don't step up, stay healthy. If FA don't get back and stay healthy, and Cleveland Farrell don't step up and stay healthy, it's going to be a long season at defensive end. And that's going to be one of those positions that you got to put at the top of the pile next season, along with tackle and probably corner, as, very, very aggressive needs that the Commanders need to attack come next offseason. But again, we got a lot of time between then and now to figure out what are our most pressing needs going to be next season. But I'm already telling you, that small sample size, it wasn't good at defensive end, which is what led Dan Quinn to say, yeah, it's a competition at defensive end, because there ain't shit going on over there. After the first, 3 dudes at defensive end, Fowler, Farrell, and Armstrong, ain't shit popping off. I'm like, FA, man, where you at? I'm looking at my watch like, hey, you ain't back yet, man? When you getting off this pup list, bro? His injury happened really late in the season, though. It happened in that second Giants game. That's what, week 12, 11, 12? It was 11, I believe it was. So yeah, I don't know if he'll be back yet anytime soon, but it ain't looking good. I can tell you that much. And if I'm crying for F.A. Obata, we got problems. So he talked about Martavius Bryant again, and he said that his signing isn't a message to the receiver group. He said, but it's just a message of, this is how we get down. Like, competition, competition, competition. It's all he's preached. The only thing I say to that is, then what you doing at kicker? If competition's the name of the game and you preaching it at all positions across the board, which you've been true to form, you said that and you've preached that and you've showed that with action, then what we doing at kicker right now? Now, I get it. In order to bring another kicker in, you got to cut somebody. Maybe you don't want to cut anybody. I get that too. I get that as well. But don't tell me that it's competition across the board and that's what we promoting, and then you cut a kicker and you give the job essentially to Riley Patterson. Don't tell me that it's competition across the board everywhere, because that's not what's going on at kicker right now. But I do think this is a bit of a message to the receiver group, but I don't think it's a message to shake up anything among the top 5. I think this is more of a message to the back end guys. Like, this shit ain't good enough. Y'all are not doing things to separate yourself, and thus we're going to bring in another guy that we think can come in here and maybe even make this roster. That's what, and with Martavius Bryant being signed, my guy, Red Wing 01, last night talked about this team potentially keeping 7 receivers. That's more likely with the signing of Martavius Bryant if you're going to keep a guy like Byron Pringle as well. So, again, the more they add guys, the more the numbers may start to shift and change. And Red Wing 01 might be onto something. There could be a case for 7 receivers now with the addition of Martavius Bryant if he gets up to speed and they are pleased with what they see from him. And they're going to throw him into the fire. I told you, he got first-team reps today. They're going to throw him in this preseason game on Saturday, and they're going to say, all right, big fella, let's see what you got. And I'm not going to lie, the 88 looks good on him. The 88 looks good on him. We'll see what he does. He's 32 years old, has not played in the NFL in 6 years. So that should mean that there should be a ton of tread left on those tires. So he's not a normal 32-year-old. I'll say that much. But I think it's getting very interesting that 7 could be more realistic at receiver than 6 now with this addition. And that would mean you'd have to trim off fat somewhere. Offensive line, linebacker. I'm looking at linebacker and I'm saying, if y'all don't play better, might be you, right? But again, a lot of people want to keep Tyler Owens. So again, we shuffling the deck. They are not cutting Jeremy Reeves. I repeat, not cutting Jeremy Reeves. So there's that. If they do, I'll be back with a double up. I'm standing 10 toes down on that one. He talked about Emmanuel Forbes. And he talked about Forbes and he said that he thought Forbes did some good things. He pointed out the good things that Forbes did in the game against the Jets early on. He was physical in the run game, put his head down, put his shoulder down, and got involved and got his hands dirty, which you like to see on an early run when the first team was out there. He had that play down the left sideline that I told you. He was in position to intercept the football, and I don't know what the hell he was doing. Look, he was fighting for his life because the guy was on his back, so to speak, but he should have been trying to pick that shit off, and he kind of just looked like he was happy to be in the position that he was in. And Quinn said, yeah, he was in great position. I'd actually like to see him make a play on that football and take it away. And I was like, me too, Dan. I said the same shit after the game. But he's like, they want to continue to see him play with confidence and, put himself in positions to make plays and be physical like he was on that first play, that first run play. And so they want to continue. And, they asked him about him being on the second team depth chart. And if I'm not mistaken, a new depth chart was released today because you have to release an updated depth chart before every preseason game, right? I think that's mandated by the league. I don't think you're going to see too many changes on that depth chart necessarily, but and clearly, and this is the biggest takeaway, clearly the depth chart don't mean a damn thing because as we saw, Forbes was listed as second on the depth chart, but he was starting when the starters were out there on Saturday. And Percy Butler was listed as third string. He's a second string safety. So DQ said this already. Don't read too much into it. We're going to overreact because that's what we do. The first one is always the big one because you want to see where guys are. But there's not going to be too much movement at this point. So they just want to see continued growth from Emmanuel Forbes. He talked about how he felt on the sidelines not calling plays. So DQ called defensive plays in Atlanta, his first go-round. Obviously, he was the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys last week up in the booth. Or last 3 years for the Cowboys up in the booth. So he's turning over play calling duties to Joe Witt Jr. And he said one of the things he learned in Atlanta is that he's got to delegate. You got to take some of the things off of his plate, allow guys that he hired to do their jobs so that he can focus on some of the bigger picture things like game management, when to go for it on fourth down, when to punt the football, when to challenge a play, when to call a timeout, things of that nature. And he said he enjoyed that process in this game, kind of being in the moment, when plays were being made by players, he was able to kind of celebrate some of those things. Also being able to be very vigilant of the clock and, when to go for it on fourth down, things of that nature. So he said he enjoyed that. And it's a constant process for him as well. This is all kind of new for him too. So he talked about getting these reps for himself as well. And then last week, he was asked by one of the media members, what is something he didn't want to see in the first preseason game or the first week of practice and leading up to the game with the Jets? And I would have thought the easy answer would have been, I don't want to see any injuries. But he didn't say that last week. He didn't say that this. I guess because that's a given, right? Much like every, week during the season when we go through our keys to the game, and I kind of don't want to mention, winning the turnover battle, don't turn the ball over, but I have to, because if I don't, somebody's like, hey, we got to win the turnover battle. Like, that's a given. Like, that's baked into any keys to the game, but I still always feel the need to have to mention it anyway. He didn't mention it, but that's a given, right? You don't want to see anybody get hurt on any side, on either side, right? But he said this last week, he really didn't have an answer. This week, he was more prepared. But he said, he took it and he went twofold with it. Instead of just focusing on things he doesn't want to see, he said, I'll give you some things I do want to see and I don't want to see. He's like, I don't want to see missed tackles, right? So he's like, I want the missed tackles to go down, right? That's what I want to see. Or if you want to answer the question the way it was asked, I don't want to see missed tackles continue to happen. I don't want those to continue to go up. But he said also, and he did say this, he's like, in training camp, there are certain things that you expect. There are variables that you plan for. One of those things is tackling not being great early in the preseason because you're just not doing as much of it as you used to back in the day when there was just more opportunities with pads on to practice tackling. With the CBA and the way that it's set up and how they structure practice and the days, and it's just not a lot of hitting going on anymore. So that's to be expected, he said. But we're going to make sure that we key in on that because we don't want to see the missed tackles that we had last week. He said, I don't want to see any giveaways. We didn't have any last week. I want to keep that consistent. But he says, I want to see the takeaways go up. So what I don't want to see is us come away with 0 takeaways again. So if ball is life, last week we were on life support. We got no turnovers. I don't even think we were close to creating a turnover last week, if we're being honest with one another. So he's like, I don't want to give it away, and I want to see us take the football away. And I know he's got to be some kind of pissed if he's keeping up with his former team because they picked off Stetson Bennett 4 times, did the Cowboys, second and third stringers. Yet our guys can't even get close to taking the football away. So we'll see if that ramps up this week versus the Rams. But was not a great start from the defense in that capacity, taking the football away. So that was the extent of the DQ presser. And that was day 13, essentially, of training camp. So let's get to the comment section and see what you guys have to say. Video channel, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. And thank you for kicking us off today. Who writes, sup, Lou? Sup, video channel? Martavius is making this roster. I won't go as far as to say that quite yet, but it feels like I've done something that I was reluctant to do this entire time because of his presence here. I've extended the number of receivers that they could possibly keep on this roster from 6 to 7. I haven't done that this entire time. The number has been hard line, set, line drawn in the sand at 6. They're not going over 6 because we don't have enough talent to keep a 7th receiver. That's been my stance the entire time. Well, that changes now with the addition of Martavius Bryant. You could see them keeping, because we got 5 already. And that 5 is locked, set, and ironclad, right? So now adding a Byron Pringle, if he continues to return kickoffs in these games, and we'll see, he feels like a guy that's trending towards making his team. And clearly, if they add Martavius Bryant and they like him and they want to keep him, that would put you in a position where you have 7. Here's the thing on Martavius Bryant. You could cut him, right? Let's see that he has marginal impact in the preseason, right? 3 catches, 27 yards, no touchdowns, and he's just kind of going through the motions. But they like what they see, but you don't have to keep him on the roster. Guess what? Martavius Bryant was sitting out there this entire time, and nobody signed him. And nobody signed him for essentially 6 years before Dallas signed him last year. So guess what? The league has spoken. Nobody wants a 32-year-old receiver who hasn't played in 6 years. So guess what you could do to Martavius Bryant? You could cut him and put him on the practice squad. And if you need to pull him up on game days, you can do it. So I'm not going to be so hasty to say he's definitely making the roster, because you don't have to keep him in order to keep him around. You could cut him, put him on the practice. He's not going anywhere. Nobody's coming to take him from you, right? He'll be here. Just like Dallas had him on the practice squad last year and nobody touched him this whole entire offseason. Nobody brought him in except us. Nobody touched him. He'll be there if you cut him, is my point. So while I'm willing to stretch the number to 7 because of his presence, I'm still looking at the position and saying it's 6 to me. Because you can cut Martavius Bryant and have him ready to go at the drop of a hat to activate him on game days, on the practice squad. So we'll see. He says, book it. At 6'4", with speed and physicality, he provides a stretch the field option with Diami and Cliff's air raid. Jahan in a make or break it year. But I had already said that about Jahan, that this is a big year for Jahan. They're not going to cut him this year. But this season and how it goes, and rightfully so, and I believe wholeheartedly in this, which is why I've said this about Jahan, that this is a big year for him. This year, because this is their first time being exposed to Jahan. It's one thing to see him from afar. It's another thing to be here, see him every day, see how he works, and understand what kind of a football player he is. This year is going to go a long way in determining Jahan's future here. Because if Jahan has a subpar year, they're going to look to replace him with a true number 2 option next year, whether it be free agency, like a T. Higgins, or the draft, right? Or Brandon Ayuk, if he doesn't sign long-term with the 49ers or get traded to the Steelers, because that news is coming out that there's a deal in place and they'll see what happens. But if he doesn't end up somewhere else, I don't think Brandon Ayuk's going to end up here. And I've said that from the start of that whole ordeal. T. Higgins is very realistic, and he's a guy. And here's the beauty. And I thought about this last night as we talked about it. I meant to mention this last night, and I didn't think about it until after we got off the stream last night. It was a great stream last night, by the way. I enjoyed that one thoroughly. Jaden Daniels gives you something you haven't had in Washington in quite some time. And that is star power at the quarterback position that attracts other players at a premium position that would have never entertained the thought of wanting to come here before Jaden Daniels' presence here in Washington. Nobody was coming to play with Sam Howell. No one was coming here to play with Carson Wentz. No one was coming here to play with Ryan Fitzpatrick. No one was coming here to play with Dwayne Haskins. You weren't going to be able to attract a guy like T. Higgins in free agency with just money. He's got options with other teams where he can get paid and play with a better quarterback and supporting cast. With Jaden Daniels here, though, it changes the way guys like T. Higgins views this destination. And I'm telling you, if we want him and we're aggressive, we can get him in free agency next year. So, if Jaden Daniels plays well this year, it changes how players view Washington and their willingness to come here and play with him, right? That's another thing that we really haven't discussed, but that's another impact of having a guy like Jaden Daniels, because Brandon Ayuk got a large deal from the Patriots, and the deal was in place, and he said, I don't want to go there and play with Jacoby Brissett or Drake May. Right? There you have it, right? So this is a make or break it year for Jahan, because if Jahan doesn't perform this year at the level at which they're looking for from him, they're going to look to move him down. Like, I still don't think he's getting cut next year either, because I think he still provides you with 500 or 600 yards receiving. But if that's the cap on what they can get out of him, because he was a 500-yard receiver in his rookie season. He was a 500-yard receiver last year. If we can't get more than that out of you, then you're nothing more than a third option at best in an NFL offense. we got to go find a guy that can be a tag team partner for Terry. You're clearly not it. So this is a big year, and I've stated that already. I think he's going to perform well, and he's going to show that he's capable of being a big-time receiver in this league. But again, we're going to see what he does with this opportunity. It's definitely a make-or-break year for him in terms of how this group perceives him. Are you a dynamic number 2 option, or are you just a guy? Are you a jag number 3, number 4 option? And they're going to move accordingly next season based off of what he does this year. So it is a big year for Jahan. I truly believe that. GT7, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Louie, what's up? What up, GT? He says, agree. Diami and Jahan can't block. Diami can block, right? That's one of the things John Kahn said he's done well. He said Diami missed his assignment in the second quarter and Jahan on the screen. Also, why do you think Ramiz got cut? I talked about that already. Ramiz got cut because A, he doesn't have NFL experience, and I think they're looking for that. And B, I don't think his leg is that strong. And they don't trust him on those long kicks. And like I said, the league has changed. You know, kickers once upon a time needed to be reliable from the money distance, which is 40 to 49 yards. You weren't kicking 7 to 12 kicks from beyond 50 yards, 7 years ago. Now, you're kicking anywhere from 5 to, 12 kicks from 50 and beyond in a season. That didn't used to be the case. You were kicking 2 to 4 kicks from 50 plus 7 years ago. Right? It's a big deal if a guy hit a 54-yard. Oh my God, what a leg. Man, dudes are hitting 54-yarders in their sleep. Your kicker better be able to kick it from 54 yards or else. I don't think Ramiz could do that consistently. So that, coupled with the fact that they wanted a veteran kicker with NFL experience, I think that's why he got cut. But, as far as Diami missing an assignment in the game, it may have happened. I'm not doubting that. But they like his physicality in the run game as a blocker. So, for whatever it's worth. Door Gunner, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Door Gunner writes, I got Ramiz cut. I'm coming for their job, Lou. 1 down, 1 to go, Door Gunner. I told you this already. Those who stay ready don't have to get ready. All right. Stay warmed up. Stay in that bullpen. Stay ready. All right. Now, I'm going to need you to be ready to make a tackle too, though. We had this discussion last night. If you can't make a tackle, I can't put you on the field. Because at any point, you might have to make a tackle. So just keep that in mind. JP, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, John Perez, thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Writes, defensive end depth scares me. I'd draft a first-round DN in 2025. That may likely be at the top of the pile for us in terms of needs. Again, we'll see what happens with Brandon Coleman and the tackle position. That's going to be a position of need regardless, whether he turns out to be good or not. But if he's good, then you can push it down the list a little bit because all you would then be looking for is a right tackle to replace Andrew Wiley at some point. So you wouldn't be as dire to do that in the first round maybe. But obviously, Coleman's development will go a long way in determining how high on the list left tackle is. Corner looks like it's going to be a position whether we like it or not. You got Juice going into his final year of his deal. Michael Davis signed a 1-year deal, and we don't know what the hell we're going to get out of Emmanuel Forbes. So I'd say regardless of what happens this year, corner is probably going to be close to the top of the pile. And then obviously edge rusher, they're gonna have to do something. And whether that's free agency and that's one of those positions you would much rather find in the draft because that's a premium position and you have to pay pretty good money to get you a quality edge rusher in this league. So I think you'd rather go hunting for that guy in the draft. So we'll see if that's a position that we ultimately say to ourselves after this season is done. We need one of those in the worst way. I felt like that going into camp. Like, I don't love it. I told you guys that. I don't love it. And they haven't done anything to change my mind yet. So if KJ Henry's making this team, we got issues. All right. We got issues. Bloodshot Sports. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Bloodshot Sports writes, why isn't Jahan running the screen instead of blocking for the screen? They wanted to get Terry a touch. There's nothing wrong with getting Terry a touch. I think it's more important to get Terry a touch than it is Jahan a touch. Like, I'm glad they threw that screen to Terry. He needed a touch in that game. They need to get him a touch in this next game against the Dolphins. He needs to see the ball coming his way. He didn't see it enough last year. He didn't touch it enough early in ball games. I'm a big stickler for getting your best players involved in the game early. There was a soundbite from Tom Brady that I clipped that I wanted to play for you guys a month and a half ago, and I don't know why I didn't play it for you. Maybe I did play it for you and I just forgot. Whatever the case may be, he essentially said, and I'm paraphrasing, that he always went out of his way to get his best players a touch early in the game. He's a big stickler for, hey, I got to get Gronk a touch early in this game. I got to get Randy Moss a touch early in this game. I got to get Edelman a touch early in this game. I got to get Welker a touch early in this game. I got to get Danny Amendola a touch early in this game. I need my best players to touch it, to see the ball, so that they can get immersed in the game. They're not just running around feeling like they're doing cardio. I need my guys to understand that they're a huge part of this game. And the sooner you get a guy a touch, the more locked in they are for the remainder of the game. So I'm a huge proponent. I talked about that all last year in particular with the way things went. I would prefer them to throw that screen to Terry, not Jahan. Jahan will get his, and he got a touch later on in the game. Terry wasn't going to stay in very long. Jahan stayed in much longer. They knew that before the game started, that Jahan was going to stay in longer. So there was no urgency to get Jahan a touch now, whereas Terry's out after this drive. If we don't get him a touch here in these 11 plays, he won't get a touch today. He needed a touch. So that's why you throw the screen to Terry instead of Jahan. The question is, why is Jahan there as the lead blocker? I've already explained to you why Diami wasn't there, right? Could you have put OZ in that position? Sure. But they wanted Jahan there, and you know what they probably said? Let's see how he does. And he failed miserably, okay? Physicality is not his skill set. It's not his strong suit, and it never will be. Jahan's a small guy. It is what it is. Christopher McLaughlin, my guy Chris, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Greatly appreciate you. As always, Chris, thank you for your unwavering support and your generosity. My guy Chris writes, hey, Lou. What's up, Chris? Hope all is well with you and the fam. Likewise, as always, hope you and the fam are doing splendiferously. I don't even think that's a word, but I made it up for you, Chris. Happy Left-Handers Day from one to another. Shout out to all the lefties out there. We hold it down at all times. We don't get to change the fact that we left-handed. So we hold it down at every single point and every single turn. We make sure we let anybody know left-handers for life. All right. Happy Left-Handers Day. 2 questions. 1, how much do you expect to see Daniels from the pistol versus shotgun and why? And 2, what players surprised you the most so far and why? I think you're going to see quite a bit of the pistol, right? That's a variation of the shotgun where the quarterback's slightly closer. So in shotgun, the quarterback's roughly 5 yards away from the center, and the ball is snapped. In the pistol, you're at about 3 yards away from the center. So you can do a lot more out of the pistol. Pistol allows you to have more of a traditional run game out of the gun, right? So if you're in the pistol, the running back can line up behind you in his traditional 5-yard, depth from the quarterback, right? Whereas when he's under center, whereas if you're in gun and the quarterback's at 5 yards, you can't line the running back 2 yards behind him, right? Now he's at 7 yards of depth. That's too far, right? So pistol allows you to have more. I like the pistol because it gives you more deception in terms of what you're doing. Like, if, for instance, in gun, if your running back's offset to your right, there's only so much you can do with a run play, right? He's probably going to run to his left because he gets the ball, gets momentum going to his left, or he can stop, turn, and pivot, but that's slow developing. It's messy. I don't like it. It's clunky. If you're asking a guy to get the football, stop, turn, and run the opposite way. Whereas in the pistol, I can go left, I can go right, I can have that guy come right up behind me and go straight ahead. Like, there's so many variations. You can run play action out of that. You can run outside zone. You can run inside zone out of the pistol. So there's so much you can do from the pistol where you can't from shotgun. So I think that's going to be, I won't say a huge part of the offense, but I do think it's something that they will incorporate in this offense. And then I think you'll still see him in shotgun more than pistol, just to be clear. And then what player has surprised you the most so far and why? That's an interesting question. Are you talking in a good way or bad way, or either way, it doesn't matter? I'm just going to assume you're just talking about in general, good or bad. So before the injury, Coleman was surprising me because the way it was described to me by guys like Chris Cooley and even to Cooley was to a lesser degree because he's not out there anymore. But Logan Paulson even said, I think that this kid's got a ways to go. So I was tempering my expectations. And then, boom, he's out there with the starters and he's dominating and he's playing well. So that was surprising. But obviously this injury has kind of derailed a lot of the momentum that he was generating. Let's see. Who else has surprised me, good or bad? I don't know if I've been really surprised by any one player in particular. Owens has flashed, obviously, with the way he's playing, but he's a height, weight, speed specimen. I'm not shocked by anything that he's done to this point. I don't, nothing shocked me there. Wiley hasn't shocked me. I told you I thought he was, fully capable of making this team as an undrafted running back. So that doesn't surprise me. Ben Sinnott doing what he did in the game doesn't surprise me. That's what he did at K-State. I'd say I thought we'd see a little bit more from Luke McCaffrey. I am a little bit disappointed in, but he's a third-round pick, and he's only been playing a receiver position for 2 years. So I'm not like overly concerned or anything like that. It's not like we drafted him in the first or the second round, but I just thought he'd be a little bit further along. They were so high on him in those rookie minis, and early on he was making a ton of catches. I just thought he'd be a little bit further along and more. I think a part of this offense, but he seems to be well on the back burner right now. So that was a little disappointing, but I'm not overly disappointed in that, right? But I did think he'd be a little bit further along. But again, I'm not clocking him. And let's see. A little disappointed in the Jordan McGee injury. But see, anybody else surprise me? Can't really say that I'm surprised by anything. You know what has surprised me? I'll take that back. How poorly the kicker situation has gone. And they still have time to resurrect that situation and get it going in the right direction. But I've been really disappointed and surprised at how we haven't been able to really foster a true competition with real NFL kickers that get us feeling good about the situation. It's been very meh, and I'm not wholly confident in Riley Patterson. And now they've actually canceled the competition. It's just a one-man show, and they're going to give him an opportunity to win the job. And so I've said that this kicker competition has been depressing, and I'm surprised at that development. But maybe I shouldn't have been after they had all that time after they got rid of Brandon McManus. Remember, they did not sign a kicker right away after they cut him. We were kickerless for like 4 or 5 days. And then you go sign Ramiz Ahmed. That's the best you can do. I probably should have seen this coming and the writing on the wall. But really, nothing has truly surprised me. I've told you about a lot of the things that have transpired in camp to this point. Nothing has really surprised me. I expected the backs, Robertson and Eck to play well, and they have so far. I told you what the receiver position looked like, and I told you what I thought it would be, and it's kind of gone that way. I told you that we were light at defensive end. Quinn's talking about we need to see more from them. You know what else I am surprised by? Here's something. You said a player, maybe not a player. The lack of turnovers forced is I'm getting nervous. I probably shouldn't. It's August the 13th. I probably should take a chill pill, but I've really been heavy on, hey, this group's coming in, and wherever Joe Witt Jr. and Jason Simmons go, turnovers follow. Dan Quinn knows how to coach it up. We're going to get turnovers. This is a big week for that for me. If we don't come out of this game with at least one takeaway, hell, at least be close to forcing a takeaway. I don't think we got a sack or we're even remotely close to a takeaway in the game on Saturday. We played against all backups. That's disheartening. That's very and if not for an illegal man down the field penalty, the first team defense would not have gotten off the field with a 3-and-out. They gave up a catch on the sideline to Braylon Allen, and it would have been 1st and 10 in Commanders territory with the Jets on the move. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Door Gunner, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. My guy, Door Gunner, writes, good for one tackle, but will probably be hospitalized after. Look, what good are you to me if after, like Dan Quinn said, I don't want to hear about ending up on the injury report with a sore shoulder after making a tackle. What good are you to me if I ask you to make a tackle and now you have to be put on a gurney and carted off in an ambulance? What good are you to me if that is the case? I need you to be able. Do I have to get you in a weight room? What are we doing here, guy? Like one tackle is going to send you to the hospital? What are we doing right now? GT7, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, how serious is McGee's injury? It's not extremely serious. It's serious enough that he ruled him out of practice for the entire week. And I'll go this far in how Dan Quinn has addressed the injury. I would say it's the most serious injury that anybody sustained on the team this training camp. We've seen nicks and bruises. Johnny Newton sustained a soft tissue injury. Defoe sustained a hamstring, strain. Wiley was dealing with tightness. Cornelius Lucas was dealing with a little something. Cosme was, a little ill. We've had a little, nicks and bruises here and there. Coleman, obviously, with the pec strain, has been out the longest. But all of these guys, he termed as day-to-day. We'll monitor them, day-to-day, week-to-week. He just said Jordan McGee is going to be out for a while. And it sucks because, he was having a strong camp and we liked the growth and the progress we were seeing from him. So I think he's done for the preseason and you're just hoping he's ready to go for the start of the regular season. I think he sprained his knee. He didn't give us any specifics or, details, but usually a knee sprain is 2 to 4 weeks. I always like to just split it down the middle. If it's 2 to 4, I'm going to just put you at 3 and we'll reevaluate you then. 3 weeks puts you in that week between the last preseason game and the start of the regular season when they cut down the rosters. And I think that's when he'll probably be back in the mix. So we'll see. It's not super serious, though. Silver Fox 52, been a member for 30 months. Really appreciate you, Silver Fox. Who writes, what's up, Lou? What's up, Silver Fox? Says, any info on UFL kicker from the summer? So Jake, what is his name? Jake something. I'm assuming that's who you talk. Jake Bates, I think his name is. I think that's who you're referring to. If I'm not mistaken, didn't he sign with the Detroit Lions? I was shocked that he decided to sign because they already had a kicker, I thought. The Money Badger. But then the Money Badger injured himself, and he's out for the season. Let's see where Jake Bates is. I could have sworn he signed with the Detroit Lions. Yeah. Jake Bates is with the Detroit Lions. I just looked quickly on the Lions, one of their sites that provides content for the Lions, and they said Jake Bates is struggling mightily. He went through a 3-week stretch where he hadn't made 60% of his kicks for the Lions. But they're not wavering on him. They have not brought in a kicker to compete. Remember, they had a kicker in Michael Badgley. Bates was brought in to compete with him. And Badgley got injured, and so it's just Bates, and they haven't brought in another kicker despite his struggles because they're going to try to give him an opportunity to figure it out because they know that if what he did in the UFL is any indication of what he can do, then they feel like they got a kicker that can get it, and they just want to help him work through his struggles. But this is the big boys. This is the big boy league, right? This is the pros, and he's struggling right now. And kicking is as mental a position as there is in the NFL. And so if you can get him through this mental block that he's going through right now, he's probably going to provide, really good kicking for the Lions. But Bates is in Detroit. He's struggling right now. So this is why you don't want a young kicker, right? Because veteran kickers, they're going to miss kicks, but they can overcome that because they've been there, they've done that. They've missed kicks in the NFL before, and they know how to overcome that, right? Young kickers, it snowballs. I've watched guys that teams spent third-round picks on. The Browns spent a third-round pick on their kicker 2 years ago, and I think they cut him. Like, I think he might still be in Cleveland, but it was rough in his rookie season. My goodness. They thought about cutting him if they didn't. It was so bad. And I've seen other guys. Roberto Aguayo for the Bucks. We used to have fun at his expense. He's no longer in the league, by the way. He was the college football points leader, score-wise, ever when he left Florida State. Came in the NFL and couldn't hit the backside of a barn. And it's tough for those young kickers. So you get a good one, you got one. You get one that struggles, you could be in some trouble. So teams generally like to go with the guy that has experience. So I think that's that. GT7, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. GT7 writes, Pittman didn't look good. What do you think? I wasn't impressed. But they were supposedly bringing him here for his special teams prowess, not for his ability to help contribute defensively. And I saw why, right? If he's a dog on special teams, let him hunt on special teams. But if you're looking for depth at linebacker, and now with Jordan McGee out, that makes Pittman even more imperative. It wasn't a good look. Now, I will say, and again, I want to cut him some slack. He was in good position 80% of the time, but he was the culprit that missed the most tackles. When DQ is talking about missed tackles, he's talking about Anthony Pittman. And I don't expect that from a special teams guy, which is why I was super disappointed in Jeremy Reeves when he gave up that catch and run. I told you that was my most disappointing defensive play of the game on Saturday was Jeremy Reeves' missed tackle on a 3rd and 11 that gave up like a 19 or 20-yard catch and run by the running back out of the backfield. That shouldn't have happened, which set up Emmanuel Forbes giving up the 18-yard touchdown pass or whatever it was. He shouldn't have been in that position because they shouldn't have got the first down. And then Forbes would have had a good game. Instead, we know what happened. Door Gunner, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Door Gunner writes, I'm only 5'7", Lou. I bring specialized violence. You can be 5'7", make a tackle, and live to tell about it. Okay. The kickers aren't big in the league. A lot of those guys are, pretty diminutive in size. You can be 5'7", make a kick, also make a tackle, and live to tell about it. Get your head out of the play. That's all I would tell you. Get your head out of the play. Okay. Swaggy P, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Swaggy P writes, I'll get Door Gunner right. He'll be looking like Terry Tate, office linebacker, after we're done training. You hear that, Door Gunner? You got a trainer right here at Swaggy P. He says he's going to get you right. All right. He's going to have you looking like Terry Tate, office linebacker. Hey, go ahead. That's a good one, Swaggy P. That's a really good one. Anyway, I bring specialized violence. I'm done with you, Door Gunner. I can't. Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on Training Camp Confidential, day number 13 of training camp with the Washington Commanders. If anything else surfaces, I'll be back. But we will be live tonight for a Louie T Network podcast episode following episode 2 of Training Camp Hard Knocks with the Chicago Bears. So, and we got a lot to discuss, a number of injuries around the league, more developments in the Brandon Ayuk situation. So we got a ton of topics to discuss, and we're going to preview preseason week number 2 in the National Football League, among other topics. So hopefully you'll be able to join me for that. In any event, you guys, you know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys tomorrow. And we will be live tomorrow night for the Command Post Live. There's no practice for the Commanders. Tomorrow is a travel day as they head out to South Beach. So we will discuss the joint practice. Looking forward to that. And that will be the last time you'll probably see me all week long. So keep that in mind as well. Door Gunner, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Door Gunner writes, 5'7" and 46 years old now, Lou. Yeah, that doesn't help either. 46, though. Kickers can kick in the league for a very long time. Hey, I'm not asking you to rock somebody. I'm looking for you to push a guy out of bounds. Can you do that without straining a hamstring? Tress Way didn't rock that dude, and we got hyped. He went down and he shot his cuffs. That's all I'm asking you to do. Shoot somebody's cuffs, get your head out of it, or push him out of bounds. You can handle that at 5'7" and 46 years old. You can handle that. Swaggy P's got your back. He'll get you ready. Anyway, I digress. You guys get out of here. You guys are hilarious. I'll see you guys next time. Take care. God bless. Good night.